The Olympic Games are leading international sports events, held every 2 years, alternating between the Summer and Winter Olympics. But who chooses the host for the Olympic Games? It's the International Olympic Committee, short IOC, with Thomas Bach as its head. However, the choices of host cities made by the IOC have repeatedly been subject to pushback and heavy criticism. For example, with the awarding of the Olympics to Nazi Berlin in 1936, Beijing in 2008, and Sochi in 2014. Back in 2001, the Summer Olympic Games for 2008 were awarded to Beijing. This decision of the IOC led to an international outcry and global concerns over the human rights situation in China and Tibet, which had been illegally occupied by China since 1950. To appease the international concerns, the IOC ensured that the Olympic Games will have a positive impact on the human rights situation in China and promised to take action if China didn't meet their required standards. However, the promise of the so-called positive impact turned out to be merely a calculated PR move and nothing but hollow words. The human rights situation did not improve. In fact, the opposite happened. The announcement of Beijing being the 2008 Summer Olympic host city sparked first protests in Tibet. But it was in 2008 when the protests reached their peaks. The unrest started with peaceful protests and turned into a full-blown uprising all over Tibet when Chinese authorities used excessive force on the nonviolent protesters. The outcome of the brutal crackdown was horrendous. 400 Tibetans were killed, 5,600 arrested, and over 1,200 injured in 2008 alone. Human rights organizations have confirmed that the repression has increased immensely since the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. This eventually led to a wave of self-immolations in Tibet. Until today, 157 Tibetans have set themselves on fire as a sign of protest. Over 500,000 Tibetans are victims of forced labor. More than 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim groups are imprisoned in re-education camps, a budding genocide against the Uyghur people. Despite the worsening human rights situation, the IOC did not act, and hence they clearly broke their promises. In 2015, 7 years after the Summer Games in Beijing, the IOC awarded China again with the Olympic Games. The 2022 Winter Olympics will be held in Beijing. The well-documented crimes and human rights violations have led to an increase in voices worldwide calling for a boycott of the 2022 Olympics in China. With the renewed awarding of the Olympics to Beijing, the IOC has now deliberately chosen to ignore the grave human rights violations against Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, and Chinese, and to disregard basic principles of the Olympic Charter, such as the protection of human dignity. The IOC refuses to take any responsibility by stating that the Olympics were, quote, politically neutral, which couldn't be further from the truth. The Olympic Games have been repeatedly used by host nations as a propaganda platform to show authoritarian political systems in a good light. In 1936, Hitler tried to portray Nazi Germany as open and tolerant. China took the 2008 Summer Olympics as an excuse to intensify its brutal practices and crackdowns and converted itself into a surveillance state. Now, it wants to use the 2022 Olympics again as a propaganda campaign to portray China as a peaceful and progressive state and to distract from the systematic oppression in the country. Furthermore, China's president, Xi Jinping, utilizes the Games to consolidate his political power and foster his personality cult within China. IOC President Bach claims that the IOC is not a superworld government that can solve global issues, but the choices it makes do certainly have a political impact on the world and a very drastic impact on people's lives. The Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics is set to happen amid one of the world's worst crackdowns against freedom, democracy, and human rights.